Untrodden Peaks and Unfrequented Valleys, Section 37. This is a LibriVox recording. All LibriVox recordings are in the public domain. For more information or to volunteer, please visit LibriVox.org. Untrodden Peaks and Unfrequented Valleys, A Midsummer Ramble Through the Dolomites, by Amelia B. Edwards. Chapter 14. Caprile to Botzen, Part 4. Hence, a long and steep pull of about a couple of hours brings us out at last upon the level of that vast and fertile plateau known as the Seisser Alp, the largest and certainly the most beautiful of all these upper Tyrolean pasture mountains. Scattered about with clumps of dark fir trees, with little brown chalets, with herds of peaceful cattle, with groups of haymakers, and watched over by a semicircle of solemn, gigantic mountains, it undulates away, slope beyond slope, all greenest grass, all richest wildflowers, for miles and miles around. Yonder, to the southwest, the great plateau rolls on and on to the very foot of the Schlern, which on this side looms up grandly through flitting clouds of mists. A low ridge of black and sheltered rocks, called the Rosszahn or Horse Jaw, from its resemblance to a row of broken teeth in a jawbone of rock, connects the Schlern with the north end of the Rosengarten range, as well as with the southern extremity of the Seisser Alp, and with the ridge out of which rose the Platt Kogel and Langkaufel. But the Rosengarten is quite hidden in the mists that keep flying up with the wind from the side of Botzen. The Langkaufel, however, stern and solitary, with a sculptured festoon of glaciers suspended above a deep cleft in the midst of its bristling pinnacles, and the Platt Kogel, crouching like an enormous toad with its back towards the Schlern, show constantly, sometimes singly, sometimes both together, sometimes in sunshine, sometimes in shadow, as the vapors roll and part. A vast panorama which should comprehend the Marmolata and Tofana, and many a famous peak beside, ought to be visible from here. But all that side is wrapped in clouds today, and only the Sella and Gardenzana massives stand free from vapor. Now and then the curtain is lifted for a moment towards the west, revealing brief glimpses of wooded hills and gleaming valleys, bounded by far mountain ranges, blue, tender, and dreamlike, as if outlined upon the sunny air. But, apart from the view it commands of its three nearest neighbors, the Langkaufel, Platt Kogel, and Schlern, the great sight of the Seisser Alp is the Seisser Alp. Imagine an American prairie lifted up bodily upon a plateau from 5,500 to 6,000 feet in height. Imagine a waving sea of deep grass taking the broad flood of the summer sunshine and the floating shadows of the clouds. Realize how this upper world of pasture feeds from 1,300 to 1,500 head of horned cattle, contains 300 herdsmen's huts and 400 hay chalets, supports a large summer population of haymakers and cowherds, and measures no less than 36 English miles in circumference, and then, after all, I doubt if you will have conceived any kind of mental picture that does justice to the original. The air up here is indescribably pure, invigorating, and delicious. Given a good road leading up from Seiss or Castelruth, and a fairly good hotel on the top, the Seisser Alp as a mountain resort would beat Monte Generoso, Albisbrunn, Seligsberg, and every other Sommerfrisch on this side of Italy out of the field. The peasants of these parts preserve a vague tradition of a prehistoric lake, said once upon a time to have occupied the centre of this alpine plateau, a legend which gains some colour from the fact that were it not for the gap of the Puffler Gorge, down which the drainage flows to the Grodner Thal, there would at this present time be a lake in the depression on the summit. Having wandered and lingered up here for nearly a couple of hours, we at length begin descending by the course of the Zippichbach, a torrent flowing down the deep cleft that separates the Seisser Alp from the northwest face of the Schlern. Coming presently to a cheesemaker's hut a few hundred feet below the edge of the plateau, we call our midday halt. A bench and a table are accordingly brought out and set in the shade. The good woman supplies us with wooden bowls of rich golden-colored cream. The mules graze, the guides go indoors and drink a jug of red wine with the herdsman and his son. The mists roll away, and the huge aiguilles of the Schlern start out grandly from above the woods behind the chalet, as if on purpose to be sketched. From this point down to the bathhouses at Rotz's, the way winds ever through fir forests that exclude alike the near mountains and the distant view. About halfway down we pass within sight of the ruined shell of Schloss Hohenstein, once the home of Oswald of Wolkenstein, a renowned knight, traveller, and Minnesinger, who was born in the year 1367, fought against the Turks at Nicopolis in 1396, was present at the storming of Ceuta in 1415, encountered innumerable perils by land and sea in the Crimea, in Armenia, Persia, Asia Minor, Italy, Spain, England, Portugal, and the Holy Land, and died here in the castle of Hohenstein in the year 1445. He was buried in the church of the famous Abbey of Neustift near Brixen, where his tomb may be seen to this day. His love songs, hymns, and historical ballads are published at Innsbruck, collated from the only 3 ancient manuscript copies extant, one of which belongs to the present Count Wolkenstein, one to the Imperial Library at Vienna, and one to the Ferdinandium at Innsbruck. A more rough and primitive place than the little bathhouse of Rotz's it would be difficult to conceive. It lies at the foot of those tremendous aiguilles which we just saw now from the herdsman's chalet, but we have come down some 1800 feet since then, and now find ourselves at the doors of a building that can only be described as 2 large wooden chalets united by a covered gallery. The bathrooms occupy the ground floor, and the bedrooms the 2 upper stories. A tiny chapel, a small bowling ground, 1 large general Speissaal, where eating, smoking, and card playing are going on all day long, and a tumble-down dependance about 300 yards off for the reception of the humbler class of patients, complete the catalogue of the attractions and resources of Rotz's. What the accommodation in that dependance may be like, it is impossible to conjecture, for here in the establishment a small bedroom measuring 10 feet by 8, containing a straw-stuffed bed, a wooden tub, a chair, a table, a looking-glass the size of a small octavo volume, and no scrap of carpet or curtain of any kind, is the best lodging they have to offer. The mistress of Rotz's, a lively, clear-headed, business-like widow with 9 children, makes up 70 beds in the bath-house, and could find occupants for 70 more if she had more space. Her customers are, for the most part, small tradesmen and their families from Botzen, and peasant farmers from the neighbouring villages. 2 springs, one impregnated with iron and the other with sulphur, supply these visitors with baths and medicine. There is a priest in daily attendance, but no doctor, and the patients appear to choose their springs at haphazard. The baths are of the simplest kind, mere pine wood boxes coffin-shaped with wooden lids just reaching to the chin of the occupant, and a wooden shelf inside to support the back of his head. These boxes, ranged side by side in rows of 8 or 10, fill a succession of gloomy, low-roofed basement chambers, and look exactly like rows of coffins in a series of dismal vaults. This impression is heightened very horribly when the unwary stranger, peeping timidly in, as I did, through a wide-open door, sees a head solemnly peering up from a coffin-lid in a dark corner, and hears a guttural voice saying, in sepulchral accents, "Guten Abend." One night at Ratz's is enough, and more than enough, to satisfy the most curious traveller. Of its clatter, its tobacco smoke, its overcrowded discomfort, its rough accommodation, one has, in truth, no right to complain. The place, such as it is, suits those by whom it is frequented. We who go there neither for sulphur, nor iron, nor to escape from the overpowering heat of Botzen, are, after all, intruders, and must take things as we find them. We leave Ratz's the next morning at 9:30, having to be down at Atzwang by 2 p.m. to catch the train for Botzen. The morning is magnificent, but we are all sad today, for it is our last journey with the 2 Nessels. The path winds at first among fir forests, rounding the base of the great aiguilles, and passing a ghastly cleft of ravine, down which a huge limb of the Schlern crashed down headlong, only 12 years back, strewing the gorge, the pastures, and all the mountain slope with masses of gigantic débris. Now, still and always descending, we pass farms, hamlets, and churches, pear and cherry orchards, belts of reddening wheat and bearded barley, and come at last to an opening whence there is a famous view. From here we look over 3 great vistas of valley, northwards up the Kuntersweg as far as Brixton and the Brenner, southwards towards Trient and the Val di Non, northwestward along the wide path of the Upper Etsch in the direction of Meran. At the bottom of a deep trench between tremendous walls of cliff, close down beneath our feet as it seems, flows wide and fast the grey tide of the Eisack. The high road that leads straight to Verona shows like a broad white line on this side of the river. The railway, a narrow black line burrowing here and there through tiny rabbit holes of tunnel, runs along the other. A whole upper world of green hills, pasture alps, villages, churches, cornlands, and pine forests lies spread out like a map along the plateaus, out of which those 3 valleys are hewn, and beyond this upper world rises yet a higher, all mountain summits, faint and far distant. From this point the path becomes a steep and sudden zigzag. It is all down, down, down. Presently we come upon the first vineyard, and hear the shrill cry of the first cicala. And now the rushing sound of the Eisack comes up through the trees, and now we are down in the valley, crossing the covered bridge, dismounting at the station. Here is Answang, here is the railway, here is the hot, dusty, busy, dead-level world of commonplace again. At Answang we part from Clementi and the mules, Giuseppe going on with us to Botzen. Clementi is very loath to say good-bye, and L, albeit unused to the melting mood, exchanges quite affecting adieus with fair Nessel. As for dark Nessel, callous to the last, he shakes his ears and trots off quite gaily, evidently aware that he has finally got rid of me, and rejoicing in the knowledge. And now, arriving at Botzen, we arrive also at the end of our midsummer ramble. For a week we linger on in this quaint old medieval town. For a week the pinnacles of the Schlern and the grand façade of the Rosengarten yet look down upon us from the heights beyond the Eisack. As long as we can stroll out every evening to the old bridge down behind the cathedral, and see the sunset crimsoning those mighty precipices, we feel that we have not yet parted from them wholly. They are our last Dolomites, and from that bridge we bid them farewell. End of section 37. End of Untrodden Peaks and Unfrequented Valleys, A Midsummer Ramble Through the Dolomites, by Amelia B. Edwards. Read by Sabella Denton, August 2007.